ahead and start recording if you want, Tom. Let's see, I reminded everybody to open their chat. So we want to give a welcome to Mercedes, who you see on the first screen there. Mercedes is joining us from Mexico City. Mercedes and I met when I was in Mexico speaking for the anniversary of the lunar landing. At the invitation of the U.S. Embassy. I was there giving some NASA talks, and Mercedes was at a luncheon that I was at U.S. Embassy luncheon, where we were chatting with women in different areas of STEM who encourage STEM. And so that was kind of the topic of the luncheon. But somewhere during the lunch, Mercedes happened to mention that she likes maps. And so I perked up and said, maps? And so then we had a separate conversation, and Mercedes joined us a couple of weeks ago for Glam Gals. So I'll turn over the mic to her to just introduce herself. So welcome, Mercedes, as a guest of Glam today.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to meet you all. My name is Mercedes. I'm from Mexico City. I have a master's degree in geography, and my major is in applied cartography and in the development of educational projects in STEM education. So I love maps, as Nagin said, and it's an honor to be here, and I want to learn, and I want to see your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. Welcome. And so Mercedes is thinking about starting kind of a small scale map club, et cetera, at her university, and we look forward to talking with her about that. I should point out that a pillar of SoCal CMS is not with us today, and that's Courtney. She sends her apologies. She has a friend who had a significant medical need that for one of their parents that she needed to really help with. So that was a last minute request. So she apologizes for not being able to be with us today. And of course, she's the one who corralled the folks on the agenda. And thank you to Tom for setting up the Zoom. So we will catch up with Courtney later. And the last thing I wanted to say before we get started here is a reminder that I think we're doing it on the second Monday of the month. We have a Glam Gals, and I've sent out a few emails of that. So that is the women of CMS in Southern California. We gather for just a half hour kind of happy hour. Sometimes it goes into an hour, where we get a chance to get to know each other a little better, like we might have done if we were in person. So please do look out for that. I believe I have the emails of all of the women of CMS SoCal on that email distribution if you haven't been getting that, or if you're a Northern California guest who'd like to just join us now and then, please let me know, and I will put my email in the chat. Feel free to email with whatever. So again,
Megan,
welcome everybody. Please, yes, and I'm going to open the mic now before we get started.
Megan, quick question. Is your telephone number 818-249-5529? Is that you?
It is.
Okay, what's happening, I don't know if it's happening for everybody else, but when you talk, I have it on speaker view. I've used Zoom quite a bit, and I've never seen this happen before. You have two little icons showing, in the participants view section. Yep. You have that showing with just the telephone icon and your picture showing, but whenever you talk, all that shows up is your telephone icon.
Yes, that is true, and that's because I prefer to dial in separately as a backup, so that in case I'm dialed in from a phone line, so that in case I drop off, I have an internet drop off, I'll still be audio. Sorry, my job on the spacecraft is to think about things that could go wrong.
There you go.
It shows itself elsewhere, backups, dialed in multiple ways. But, you know, that's a good point. For when I'm presenting, I'll need to switch over or you guys won't be able to see me.
I
Well,
can
no,
can
you
see
see
can
her.
both.
still, wait a minute. No, you can still
We
see
can
me.
see
Hang on, let me
both.
try
We
again.
can see you.
Yeah, you can
Doesn't
still
matter.
see my, you'll still be able to see my
All right,
screen.
so it'll happen.
But thank you for that
There's another
reminder.
screen.
Let me look at it on the other
Yeah, yeah.
computer, see if I can find it.
Cool. Okay, so I believe Tom is going to orchestrate the switching back and forth between folks if they are not sharing their screen or if they're using the gallery. So let me turn it over to Tom for our first presenter. How are we doing on time? 10:45, and Bill, you have till 11:05.
Okay,
Yep, we are good. So Bill, go ahead and, why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
all right. Then we're going to use this one.
There.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Well, this is where we're going to start. This is a map that I live in a retirement community called Montecedro in Altadena, California. And one of our other members had this map. Her name is Helen Zeiler. And she said to me one day, "You like maps? Well, I've got one maybe you'd be interested in." So she brought it over and I looked at it. And without too much, I said, "Yeah, I'd like to have that, or I'd like to use it." And so that's where this comes from. It's also in Glenn Creason's book called Mapping Los Angeles. So if you want to look for that, you can see it there. But what we're going to do is we'll look at the overall map first, which is, come on, there we go. Okay, this is the overall map. It's Southern California. It says Greater Los Angeles, and it's by the Metropolitan Associates, whoever that was. And it shows what this part of the country looked like in 1932. So we're going to look at specific parts of that map, starting out with the index down in the corner here. There we go. And it has all sorts of interesting things that tourists would want to know about Los Angeles. For example, the Breakfast Club location, the Griffith Park Writing Academy, the Sebastian New Cotton Club, we'll see. And in any case, it also gives the name of the fellow who did the map. His name is K.M. Leuschner, and he's MRA. I don't know what MRA stands for, but that's what he is. So anyway, he's the one that did it. So we're going to look at specific parts of the map and things that might be of interest. Downtown Los Angeles, you can tell that very easily by the fact that it's canted off from north-south. Here's the Vermont Avenue over here, which is the north-south, and over in here is another street that keeps it north-south, and the rest of that's within the original land grant of Foursquare, Foursquare what? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to look at this map a little bit closer. If we pull in on a close-up of that map, right here we can see the park downtown, Pershing Square. We can see the Los Angeles City Hall right over here, the big tall building that was for many years the highest building in Los Angeles at 13 stories. This is where the old Philharmonic Auditorium used to be. They tore it down in the 1960s because they wanted to build a much better Philharmonic Auditorium than that on the same site. It's now a parking lot, which it's been since the 1960s. So that's another part of that map. Okay, well, moving on, we're going to go look to the watery side of Los Angeles, which includes then San Pedro and Wilmington down here. And the thing I want you to notice here is here are these big hotels in Long Beach, which is this area right in here. And those big hotels are there because before the breakwater that encloses all of Los Angeles Harbor was built, this was open ocean. There were waves coming into those beaches that made it an interesting place to go, where today it's dead water behind the expanded LA Harbor. This is as big as LA Harbor was in the 1930s. So give you an idea of what that looked like. Now we're going to go to the north and look at the top side of the map, and this is Pasadena, Altadena, San Gabriel over here. We'll look at this in a little more detail as well, but just so you see, there are places like Altadena up here, which you can look at. Here's the Huntington Library over in here. Okay, Huntington Boulevard across through that way. No freeways, of course, but those some highlights for that particular one. Moving on down to the southwest, this is sort of centered on Culver City. And we see some piers sticking out here that we'll look at a little more. But this just gives you an idea from Palos Verdes up through into Santa Monica. If we look at that closely, there are a couple of piers sticking out. One of them, the Santa Monica Pier, which is still there, of course. Ocean Park Amusement Park, and another one over in here. I like this Ocean Park Amusement Park because you'll see there's this crystal pier, and here are these boxes on the sides of the crystal pier, which are nude sunbathing places. I thought that was terrific. I didn't realize we had any of those right in the middle of what today would be Venice and that kind of area. But there they are, and they've got fences around them so that you had to pay to get in. I'm sure that's the story of that. Well, if we looked at Long Beach, this is what it looked like in the 1930s. You see people out camping on the sand here, enjoying the wonderful weather. The Pike is down hidden behind this building over in here. This was a very great place to go and have a good time with your kids or by yourself. By the 1960s or so, it had degenerated. The big breakwater had been completed all across, so it was quiet. And this became a thing called Pacific Ocean Park. Some of you might remember Pacific Ocean Park if you were my age and had children at that time. They loved this kind of place with a roller coaster and this ride out over the ocean in these enclosed cars. All right, well, we're going to go back further to northern part of Los Angeles. This is Altadena. This is Pasadena, excuse me. Here's Hotel Raymond and Hotel Maryland. Those were the big hotels in Pasadena at that time from the early 1900s up through 1930. Both of them burned down, so neither one of them exists anymore. Pasadena City Hall is still there, and so is this line of Christmas trees. This is called Santa Rosa Avenue in Altadena, and it's about a block from where I live, which is right over here. Anyway, to show you that street of a mile-long deodar trees was planted by one of the big developers of Altadena, and it's still there, and the trees have all grown up, and this is what it looks like in the end of the year time, because it's called Christmas Tree Lane. If you ever come up there, it's fun to come up and drive up and down the street and look at the lovely lights. It's all done by volunteers here in Altadena, which is kind of nice. Well, okay, we'll move on down into Pasadena. Here's the famous Pasadena Bridge, Colorado Street Bridge, better known to everybody else as Suicide Bridge. And they keep putting
The
up
Costin Ostrich Farm.
Yeah, oh, well, there are a couple of hundred people over a period of 90 years have jumped off of there to their deaths. And they think by putting up big nets and fences and so on, they're going to stop that. I think there are other ways to commit suicide, but in any case, that's what it's known as. Vista Del Oro Hotel overlooks that. It's now the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, who took over the beautiful hotel and made it their own. But the thing I wanted to highlight to you is down here in South Pasadena, along Pasadena Avenue, there's Costin's Ostrich Farm. I don't know whether any of you ever saw Costin's Ostrich Farm, but this is what it looked like. Bunches of ostriches wandering around. I remember going there as a child with my grandmother and feeding an ostrich an orange and then holding onto the ostrich's neck and pushing the orange up and down before it could get to its stomach. I don't think they'll let you do that sort of thing anymore, but that was back in the 30s. Okay, here moving on a little to the west, we see Occidental College here, Forest Lawn, of course, with their big monument, and Silver Lake down here. And here's the Breakfast Club. That was an institution in Los Angeles for many, many years. Businessmen would meet there on a Thursday morning, and they had their own all sorts of rigmarole, but their famous song was FBNEX, SVFX, meaning, of course, in German, do we have any eggs? Yes, we have eggs. And that was a song that we all sang every day that Breakfast Club met. So it's kind of fun thing. Okay, a little further up, Hollywood, we can see Grauman's Chinese Theater, sort of here. Grauman's Egyptian Theater, I don't know what it is now, but it's not that anymore. And here's Paramount Famous Lasky Studios down here. Okay, well, let's go back to downtown Los Angeles. Here's the City Hall, and right behind it is this place called the Paris Inn. It's another famous place from the 1930s that looked like this. And to me, the amusing part is here's the formal side. Men better wear ties. Here's the bohemian side over here. You didn't have to wear a tie. Okay, so you could take your pick where you wanted to eat in the Paris Inn. Moving back a little further on Hollywood, here's the Hollywood Bowl. We'll look at in a minute. And what else was there? I was going to show you. Barnesville Park is over here. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Well, this is what the Hollywood Bowl looked like in the early 1900s. There weren't any stadiums. There wasn't anything. There was a little stand there, but most people stood on the side of the hillside, parked their cars down here, stayed up, parked their bodies on the side of the hill here to see what was going on down in the bottom down here. Of course, this is what it looks like today on 4th of July with 20 or 30,000 people crowded into the bowl. So that's kind of fun. All right, well, this is moving down in downtown Los Angeles, below the area we were looking at before, the business district. There are some things that are of interest. Here's the Automobile Club of Southern California. Now that was very big, and it's still a very big building down there along Figueroa. The Oddfellows Temple, and of course the Colonial Mortuary, very important spot. And here's Olympic Stadium. Now you remember it's 1932. This is just before the 32 Olympics. Nothing special, but look at this area up in here. It's something called University of Southern California. And you know, no delineation of buildings or anything else. So I sometimes think people show prejudices when they design maps, because if we go from there to here, we'll notice a little difference in this university. It's rather nicely laid out. The other university of the Los Angeles and Southern California area, UCLA, is much better laid out. Beverly Hills over in this direction over in here. Okay, moving on. Whoop, come on. Moving on, we'll go to a little south of Hollywood to the area of Wilshire Boulevard. Most people who live here know Bullock's Wilshire. It's no longer Bullock's Wilshire, but the tower is still there. And next to it, with the old Brown Derby. Across the street from that, Ambassador Hotel. These are all things that were very big at that period of time. And here's another one called Bimini Bass. We'll look at that in a little more detail. In our next picture, we have the actual Brown Derby as it was in the 1930s, right up through the 60s. This was still maintained. This is the front of and it says "Eat in a Hat." This was the front of the Brown Derby. There were other places back behind it here, but this is where you wanted to eat. This is where all the movie stars and moguls came to have lunch, and they stayed at across the street. Up the street from here was Bimini Bass. Bimini Bass is a rather large-sized building. It was a plunge, that is, it was a big swimming pool. It was discovered when they were doing drilling for oil, because just beyond there is Brea and La Brea tar pit, so they knew it was there. But instead of oil, they found hot water, and so they decided to turn it into a bathing facility called Bimini Bass. So there it is. Okay. Well, now this one's, I'm sorry, this is Hollywood. Well, this is Los Feliz, Glendale, Grand Central Airport. That was a big airport back in the 30s, not anymore. It's now a shopping area. Taken over, the airport being taken over by Hollywood Burbank Airport. Below that, we found going down Alvarado and Glendale Boulevards toward Los Angeles are important landmarks like Myers Delicatessen. Actually, Angela's Temple. This is where Amy Semple McPherson held out and made a lot of money for herself and for that particular brand of religion. If we look at it today, this is the way Angela's Temple looks today. It's a rather grand building, and it's still a very grand building in there. it still stands right at the top of Echo Park. If we move down off Long Beach, here is this Johanna Smith Pleasure Ship. Now, there were a number of these that operated around Southern California, and their whole purpose was not pleasure in that sense, but was a gambling ship. And we had 3 or 4 of these off coast, just beyond the 3-mile limit, had little fast-acting motorboats that would take you out of the gambling ship. That's what it looked like. That's the way it ended, with the whole thing burning. And a number of them ended with being raided by United States people who were interested in making sure they didn't have free booze and gambling offshore. Moving over again to, this is San Gabriel, that area of Valley Boulevard along here. San Gabriel Mission, not a very good picture of San Gabriel Mission, but just below it is Gay's Lion Farm. Did you know we had a lion farm in Southern California? There's Mr. Gay sitting on one of his lions. Now, honestly, I believe that's a stuffed lion. Well, live ones. There were live ones there. I can attest to that. There's the county hospital and what used to be the Santa Fe Depot down here. And we'll go back to that area around Culver City because there's something interesting to see there. You see there are actually 2 airports shown in this photograph. Clover Field, which is today's Santa Monica Airport, an airport for small private planes, although they get a lot of complaints about the noise from small private jets. And then Mines Field down here. You see, much smaller than Clover Field. Mines Field transformed into something else. Here it is, Mines Field in the 1930s. Lots of space around it here. And here we see it in dedication in July of 1930. Pull that up a little more, just a moment. Yeah, Mines Field dedication in July of 1930. You see the biplanes coming in. These 2 buildings are still there. If you look across Los Angeles, LAX from the terminals, you'll see those 2 buildings still on that side over there. So, but that was the main terminal back in the 1930s. All right, there was another thing in that photograph, in that particular map that we haven't paid a lot of attention to, and that is this funny looking thing over in here called the Olympic Village. This was built specifically to house Olympic Games participants for the 32 Olympics. And you can see this is not exactly the luxurious type of hotel that somebody might expect today, but instead rather cramped little shacks in a semicircle around here. You can see there's a blimp in the background back there, way off in the back. Anyway, that's what the participants in the 1932 Olympic Games lived in. And I don't see any fences between the men's and the women's part of the thing, but that came later, I guess. All right, we move on.
Bill, if I may jump in,
This is down around Southgate in that area there. There were a couple of very large tire manufacturing companies there, Firestone and Goodyear. Goodyear had their own blimp down here. Here's Signal Hill on the top of Long Beach here. And here's something in the middle that I never knew was there called Angelus Abbey. Angelus Abbey is still there. It's in the middle of Compton. It was a mortuary and a crematorium and so on, still stands. Looks like that. Well, if we went even further south, we ran into the Palo Verde Peninsula. Today, this whole peninsula is pretty much covered with rather expensive homes. There's the country club at the top of the hill. And this is showing one road coming across to Pacific Coast Highway, which is this part here. And San Pedro is right over in here, Fort MacArthur and so on. The Green Star is an area called Portuguese Bend. And in the 1950s and 60s, or 1940s and 50s, it was really a nice place. Had a wonderful beach club there that one of my friends belonged to. We'd go down there with our kids and play in the sand, and it was lovely. The only problem, and there were bunches of houses there, not big houses, small houses. But the problem with this area was it hadn't decided whether it wanted to be a mountain or it wanted to be the bottom of the bay. And in 1956, the decision was made that it was going to slide down into the bay. So this is today's road. If you drive down there today, you run through this particular section of road like this, and all the pipes and so on supplying water have to have joints that allow them to move, because this whole area is still moving. And so it's kind of an interesting place to go sometime. So if you thought Southern California was a little crazy back in the 1930s, welcome to the movie La La Land. And you may remember the 110 and the 105, 110 and 105 Ferry coming together. This is the bypass over from coming south from Los Angeles over towards LAX. And for that movie, as you can see, they turned both sides into going in one direction, which is sort of, it would be kind of hard to get to LAX from downtown if all of the freeways only went against you. So I thought this was a typical picture of Los Angeles today. And with that, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Don't you,
Thank
you
you
don't
so
all
much.
have to applaud right now. End of verse 4.
Are there questions for Bill?
Yeah, hi, this is Ron. So I put it on chat. Bill, I looked up on Google and the population of LA doubled from 1920 to 1930.
Yeah.
The population was 1.3 million. What was the great growth due to then?
Well, there were a number of things. A lot of people came to Southern California because the time they really came was after World War II. But it's also had to be an area that was very agricultural in the 1920s. We had vast orange groves and others, and people could come out here and get cheap land and plant crops that would be available all year round because the climate would allow them to grow in the winter as well as in the summer. So that was part of the incentive. There were lots of other things. The movie industry brought people in. But as I said, the biggest influx of people to Southern California came during and right after World War II. And the defense industry was very big in Southern California until LBJ decided to move it to Texas. All of it disappeared at that point in time. But it was a big incentive for people to come. Housing was cheap, which it isn't now. And in fact, more people in Southern California made fortunes off real estate than anything else. The real estate they owned and sold 20 years later at double or triple or quadruple the price they bought it for.
Bill, I had a chat question. I noticed in your index there's a list of some very famous old-time movie actors, and
Yes.
can I imagine that those are depicted on the map as well, where their houses were?
I don't, they gave the addresses. Let me pull that back up again. They gave the addresses, which is sort of strange because most people today don't want that information out. Now, I've done another one on Homes of the Hollywood Stars, and we picked out some that were rather important at various times. But most of them nowadays, if you have their address, you can't see through because there's a big gate and lots of trees growing around it. So times have changed.
But on this
People
map,
used to-
are they shown on this map by name?
Yeah, well, they give you the addresses right over in here, and they don't show them, but they give you the exact address. For example, John Barrymore was at 6 Lower Road. I don't know where that is, but in any case, yeah. Back in the 1930s and 40s, when buses would go by in a residential area where a movie star lived, quite often they would come out to the front door and wave at the buses. You don't see that happening anymore.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can, Len.
I'd like to make 2 comments. Wonderful presentation, Bill. And you mentioned that you were visiting the ostrich farm, I guess it was while you were a teenager or something. It's always nice to have something that you can identify with somebody famous. And in this situation, you can identify with Leonardo da Vinci because he visited the Duke of Parma, who had an ostrich farm on his royal grounds. And that's where most likely he got his idea to use ostrich eggs, which are rather tough shells, to make his globe, his famous globe. And as you know, ostrich shells are really oblong, like a hen's egg, but much bigger. And so what he did most likely is he used two ostrich egg shells, and he cut them in half and used the two bottoms to create a round earth. So you can always think of Leonardo da Vinci when you remember in the past that you visited the ostrich farm. The other thing is that from my reading and stuff, we have to realize that many times the map maker, if he was totally in charge of the making of his map, really also wanted to send some kind of a message many times, was not necessarily flat reality, as other people know it, because he wasn't just a technician being hired to make a map for a state. And so the map maker here may have left out that structure that you were talking about. Maybe he had a personal problem with the owner. Maybe he just wanted to leave it out so that it would identify this map as his. While other people, when he would say, no, we didn't copy it, we got it elsewhere, and he would show that this is the only map missing a particular thing. So we don't know the real reason why he left it out. He may have also forgotten. So thank you.
It's interesting. Carson's ostrich farm was built for the plumes, the tail feathers of the ostriches. And when they went up in the 1920s, the place died.
Yeah, they were great. Yeah, ostrich feathers were very popular.
And a lot of the ostriches were smuggled out of South Africa because it was illegal to export them.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Louise. Okay, thank you, Bill, for a really
thank you very much.
presentation. And let's see, now we're doing reasonably on time. So Nick, you have 15 minutes, and if you could try to leave a few minutes for questions, let's turn it over to you for cave painting.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess pretty soon there'll be an image. I don't see it yet, but
you should be able. Can other people see Nick's name?
I see my name.
Yeah. So
you can show the images.
Yeah, there's a map now.
Okay, that's not my map, but it's a nice map. You have the cave painting itself? Okay, good. You can go back to the last one if you'd like for a second. Okay, so basically, I'm very interested in celestial mapping, and there's two kinds of celestial maps. One is maps of the constellations and position of the stars in an imaginary grid in the sky, similar to latitude and longitude on the ground. And the second kind are the solar system maps that deal with the cosmology of things like Earth-centered solar system and sun-centered and so on, and mapping of the planets. So those are the two areas, but I got interested in what was the earliest celestial map? What was the earliest map that we could trace? And you can argue that there's the Farnese Atlas, which shows Atlas holding the celestial globe on its back, circa 2nd century BC was an early map because it depicts all the Greek constellations known at the time. Or before that, there are Egyptian statues of gods and goddesses, and before that, papyrus paintings showing celestial images. But the next slide, I think, arguably could stand as the oldest map of the heavens that there is. This is taken from a cave painting in Lascaux. You can go back to the last slide just for a second. So you see where the Lascaux area is in the south of France. It's an area rich in different caves, Paleolithic caves. And next slide. It was discovered in 1940, the Lascaux complex in the Dordogne region of France. And on the walls are some 1,500 engravings and 600 wall paintings made about 17,000 years ago. So that's the date that this potential map stands for. The paintings generally are large animals that were found in the area, such as horses, deer, bison, and aurochs, which is in this figure. Aurochs were large, long-horned, extinct wild oxen that are ancestors of today's domestic cattle. But they also had handprints and pictures of people as well. The pictures are dynamic. They're usually in motion using pigments, red, yellow, and black colors from charcoal and various minerals. Lascaux today is closed because of conservation. The carbon dioxide of our breaths tends to fade the paintings. But there is a visitor's gallery and a reconstruction of the cave that was put up in 1983. So if you go down there, you can still get a feeling of it. So this image was made by a colleague of mine, Damian Alice, Dr. Damian Alice, who's a research professor of chemistry at Syracuse and University and a member of NASA's Solar System Ambassador Program. And what this shows on the left of the image is a piece of the cave featuring an auroch. You see on the wall painting here, the front part of the auroch with several black dots painted around its eye. 4 similar dots are located to the lower left that are in the circle, and a clump of dots are painted just above the shoulder. So Damien got interested in seeing if this might have been related to an actual image of the sky. And so he created the side-by-side image you see on the right, which is a view of the heavens. And this is centered around Orion's belt with the 3 stars of the belt, and the Taurus the bull with the famous Hyades cluster circled. That's the face of the bull, and the shoulder of the bull is the Pleiades cluster, which is shown in the upper right. And his argument is that some ancient Paleolithic relative of ours, glancing at this very prominent feature, the Pleiades and Hyades are in a lot of ancient images. For example, the Aborigines had great myths around the Pleiades because they're so obvious in the sky. And this area might have impressed the painter of the picture on the left to reconstruct the map in his cave painting. And you see the relationships that Dr. Alice suggested. The 4 stars on the lower left are representing the 3 stars in Orion's belt. The area around the eye of the auroch is the face of the Taurus the bull, or the Hyades star cluster, and the shoulder dots in the upper right are represented by the Pleiades. So I might argue that this is arguably the oldest star map ever made that depicts an area of the sky that impressed a painter, and he put it into his painting as an incorporation of what he saw in the heavens. I might mention an interesting situation that the auroch, being a bovine animal, it's interesting that this area of the sky was later interpreted by the Sumerians and the Greeks as a bull. And one wonders if there's some sort of mythology that got carried through the ages. Probably not. It's probably a coincidence because the Lascaux Caves has a lot of aurochs and other animals, and this just happened to be an auroch that was located in the area that today we see as an area of the bull. But I thought I would show this as kind of a fun thing to show as arguably the oldest celestial map that exists.
Wow.
What year, Nick, was this discovered?
Oh, the Lascaux was discovered in 1940, the cave itself. The cave painting is thought to date back to about 17,000 years ago.
And
you might also consider that to be probably the oldest map, which also happens to be a star map.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
I mean, both. You can look at it both ways.
Yep.
Nick, was there any explanation about the Pleiades complex? And if you look at it, it's tilted like at 90 degrees relative to the others.
I'm not aware of that necessarily being an issue, except that, you know, I mean, these are primitive paintings, and it might be that he just put the dots up from memory, and that was the way it was oriented on the painting itself. Of course, you know, there have been a lot of people who have found images in these cave paintings that represent things as like a small little philosophical area where people interpret all kinds of things. This one in particular, I think, is one of the best examples of a relationship between the heavens and a cave painting that's pretty interesting to see. It could have been chance, but it's just an interesting sort of analogy comparing the two.
Maybe it's related to the same kind of artistic license used by emphasizing UCLA instead of USC.
Maybe so, or maybe this particular artist of the cave painting was an abstract painter and he added his own interpretation.
Ahead of his or her time.
Ahead of his time.
Yeah, this oryx looks pretty realistic to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's very interesting. The caves are very interesting because the animals are pretty realistic, and they're done one over another often because they were done in different time periods. And they couldn't erase them. But the spooky ones are the hands. Some of these early cave painters would do a stenciling outline of their hand, and you see human handprints all over the place that are really kind of spooky to think of somebody. That's actually somebody's hand that was represented on the wall in paint.
So Nick, this is Ron. If the dots on the oryx's head really represent Hyades, why would they be on the head rather than up in the sky?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question. In other words, I think the artist drew what he saw in the heavens in terms of the features that were obvious, like Orion's belt's obvious, the Hyades is obvious, and the Pleiades is obvious, and at the same time decorated it with an auric. I'm not sure why he would put the auric there in the middle, except the Pleiades are the seven sisters, arguably 6 or 7. Some people see 7, most people see 6. And in the depiction here, you see 6 with a naked eye. So that was probably fixed into its location. And Orion's belt, if you add another star, and maybe there was a supernova, who knows what happened, would be oriented that way. Why in the middle he put an auric and around? Well, maybe, but I have to tell you that the triangle for the Hyades, the shape of the major stars does look like a face, kind of looking at you, and that's why it was made into a kind of a Taurus the bull with the horns going to the upper left in the right-hand picture. So it was kind of face-like the Hyades. It might be that was some semblance, reminded him of a face, and he drew an oryx face there.
Maybe it's so that the eye can be a star of the bull.
Well, there is a bright star right there in the cluster, and you see that the eye is about the right orientation for the bright star that's right adjacent to the Hyades.
So do you think these dots on the oryx were painted at the same time?
This particular painting, probably, as well as they can tell, were done in the age of the pigments. But I don't know for sure. In 17,000 years is a long time ago, and there's probably a lot of error. It could have been painted 20 years later or 50 years later, some of them. I don't know that. I don't know that they can really tell if they were done in one sit down or added later.
Nick, this is Fred. When you look at the other images of the depictions of bulls in the Hall of Bulls, the dots that appear on the bull's head, they appear on many other images in the hall.
Yeah, and as I said, this could just be a chance that he drew a bull there, but it's just interesting to speculate because of the orientation of the 3 obvious celestial features that might be related to that. But yeah, there are other oryx, and they do have a lot of dots around them. This particular orientation is just intriguing to speculate because it does a pretty good representation of the sky. But you're right, no one knows for sure.
I have a question for Nick. Do you ever see the Pleiades at a very, very acute angle in which if you were looking at the bull, the Pleiades really would appear to be just above the bull's neck?
Probably, the orientation is probably fairly consistent. I mean, you go in the southern hemisphere, things get flipped. But the Pleiades come up the same time every year. And so unlike
Yeah,
the planet, they tend to be in the same relative orientation, so that
I see.
on the right is pretty constant. I mean, I guess it's possible to turn your head or something and the orientation changes, but this particular slant is kind of the way the sky is oriented. Now, I will say, and I don't know the answer to this, stars move. And 17,000 years ago, some of the stars, the stars are three-dimensional. We're seeing the stars through a three-dimensional lens, and some of the stars we're seeing are much closer to us than other stars, even though they're in a line. So it might have been some shifting 17,000 years ago that made things slightly different, and perhaps they were oriented a little different, or maybe the Pleiades were oriented different. I don't really know the answer to that, but it's possible.
Well, thank you, Nick. I, of course, I always enjoy the space-based stuff, and so then I looked at the time and went, oh. So thank you very much. That's a great example of how kind of a single slide, so to speak, can have a lot of information. Thanks, Nick. Okay, so now we are headed for Steve talking to us about Vischer maps, which I'm not sure I'm saying correctly.
Look at this, it's my girl. My girl.
And James, I think you have a open mic.
With the kitty cat.
I do.
Your cat's crossing over. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Tom, you want to go ahead and put the map up? So the map I'm going to talk about today is a map of essentially the New England coast, if you will, mid-Atlantic up through, Boston and north. And there's a number of reasons why I thought I'd talk about this map. Tom asked me to do it the other day, so I put this together rather quickly. This is referred to as the Vischer map. It's a map of essentially New Amsterdam and New Belgium. It's called Nova Belgique, Nove Anglais. I can't pronounce it in the language, but essentially it's a map that was published in 1655. And really, for about 100 years, became probably one of the most popular maps, of the Americas. It's highly accurate. I think it has all of the place names and all the Indian tribes known in 1650. So, in that regard, it has a lot of detail and was used on many different occasions. So, it became something of a bestseller. That the map was initially issued in 5 states by Vischer. The first state of the map is only known in 3 copies, so it's really unobtainable. The map I have, this is not my copy, is a second state, which is, I think, reasonably rare, and it's the first map really where you can have a picture, if you will, or rendering of New Amsterdam, the city which preceded what is today modern-day New York. So I'll give you a couple of fast facts about it. If you can zoom in, Tom, into Manhattan a little bit. So this is the first map to accurately depict the shape of the island of Manhattan in its oblong state. There are earlier maps that show the island of New York or island of Manhattan, but they aren't really accurate. The geography is not accurate. So that's one of the unique things, the first shape of New York this way. If you blow back a little bit, Tom, you can kind of sort of follow up back a little more. You follow up the Hudson River there to the left of Manhattan, up to what you see they call the top Fort Orange, which is currently Albany, New York. That was a big settlement and a fort that the Dutch had. What's also very interesting is, hey Tom, you may want to flip over to the other map, would you? Because it's got better topography. And so you can see Fort Orange up there. That's essentially Albany, New York, and along the Hudson. And for me, what's really interesting, having lived in New York on various occasions, and I've lived in New York, Connecticut, Manhattan, just to see the place names and their origin in Dutch is really interesting. So if you roll down a bit, go down the Hudson River a bit, Tom, closer to Manhattan, and you see things like they call it the Tappan Sea, which Tappan's there. And if you travel in New York, there used to be the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is now the Governor Mario Cuomo Bridge. So you know, I really love, you know, seeing the old place names and seeing them today. I live in Westchester County in Bronxville, and this Sewanee was a tribe of Indians. I live right by Sewanee Country Club, so it's kind of interesting to kind of realize that back in the mid 1600s, you know, all these names are maintained. Come down here a little more, you know, and so the map actually, in terms of its accuracy, you can zoom out a little bit, Tom. Sorry, get a little bit more view of the full thing. You know, the map was used in a number of occasions for boundary disputes. It was used by William Penn in a dispute over Maryland and and Pennsylvania to determine the boundaries between the two states, the territories at the time. And you know, so in that regard, it has, you know, it sort of lived, it had a long life and was very productive. It's also a very beautiful map, and different states of it. The coloring is quite different. But if you look, I love the little animals. You know, the Dutch were just crazy for, you know, for beavers. You know, beavers have mystical powers. You may see some of the Herman Mole maps of beavers walking around on two legs carrying, you know, carrying stuff. But it's pretty funny to look at the little animals. I think they're cute. So I think it's just sort of a charming map in that respect. It has a lot of, you know, a lot of decorative elements to it. Let's take a look in a minute, Tom, at the cartouche. I'll talk a little bit about this. What's also interesting about this map is, you know, the sort of the time at the time, you know, New Amsterdam was occupied by Dutch, and you know, they're really the view here of New Amsterdam from Governor's Island. It presents New York. It looks a reasonably nice little city or settlement, but in actual fact, it was really in bad shape. You know, the fort was really in disrepair. The crane wasn't working. You know, there were no public schools. Sewers were horrible. They were constantly attacked by Indians. It was really in bad shape. And what happened was, you know, some residents of New Amsterdam essentially got together and formed. There's the guy hanging there on the pillory is interesting. And in fact, that's sort of controversial because there's no records of them actually doing, you know, executions or hangings that way, but they just dropped it into the photo. And this is actually the first obtainable view of New York you can get. But what happened was a gentleman, a lawyer, Adrian van der Donk, kind of organized, and they kind of put together essentially a protest that they wanted to send to The Hague back in the Netherlands to just say, hey, look, this place is not working well. The government's, you know, not doing their job. You know, incompetent directors were being attacked by Indians. No education, and really that became kind of the you know, that's carried forward today in what we know as sort of our First Amendment rights, the right, you know, to redress grievances with the government. So very important kind of attitude that continues to live on and lives on today in the spirit of the New Yorkers. This map you can see is a later state because it has New York actually on it in English, whereas the original maps only have New Amsterdam. Hey, Tom, go back to the cartouche again, please. And another element that's interesting, so you see the sizing of like Nova Belgi is bigger than you know, the rest of the lettering. That's a little bit of persuasive cartography because they wanted to kind of really depict the Dutch importance relative to the English occupation of the colonies, and then so that was sort of an attempt to kind of claim a little more so a little more importance than actually probably was the case at this time. Peter Stuyvesant had negotiated with the English to divide the colonies up a bit. But really, it wasn't. You know, it was probably more equal at this time. Come on, some more. We talked about the view.
How about Philadelphia?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this version here has. Can you scoot in on Philadelphia? So like a lot of maps, this state is probably a third state. It has Philadelphia depicted. Earlier maps were actually pre-Philadelphia, and you can see the Schuylkill there, Schuylkill. If you've been in Philadelphia, if you travel through there's the Schuylkill Expressway. But this is interesting. The version I have does not have Philadelphia. It predates the founding of Philadelphia. So certainly, like with many maps, they've, you know, as they iterate over the the place names, they'll add content to the map. So, yeah. I think I don't think I have a lot more to really to discuss. I just think it's a really beautiful map. It's important, I think, for the story around the founding of New York City by the Dutch, and then subsequently taken over by the British.
There's been a book written about this, right?
Yeah, there's a book. It's called "The Island at the Center of the World," written by Russell Shorto. He's written a number of books. So, if I encourage you to take a look at it if you have interest in New England or New York history, and it really tells a fascinating story about really how the area was settled and the characters involved, and you see their names all over the place in the Northeast, whether you're up in
What's the timing, Steve, from when the Dutch sort of settled initially, and then to when the British, the American, how did that?
Yeah, 1625, I think, is the initial settlement of Manhattan. That's the date that's on the seal of the city of New York. And then variously through 1650s, 1670s, I think, then it became more English, in those times. Stuyvesant had a treaty with the British, and it's unclear. I don't have the exact date when they actually took over New York, but in that area, 1625 to 1650 would have been kind of the Dutch rule of Manhattan, and then years following that, it began to kind of bleed off a bit. At this time, the British really had New Haven as their Hartford and New Haven were big British strongholds up in Connecticut. You can also see here, this is this river here coming into the Long Island Sound. You scoot back a little bit. So that's called you can see that's the Connecticut River. If you scoot up, it's called the Versche River, which is fresh river in Dutch. So we had a speaker come to that. Went up with the Connecticut Map Society, and a professor from Wesleyan came. He's a scholar on Adrian Block. You can see Adrian Block's island here off the tip of Montauk. So Block was a big explorer of the Long Island Sound and the rivers and
Block Island.
Yeah. If you go to the right a bit, you see Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. So anyway, so for those of us in the Northeast, this is a kind of interesting map to play with because all the places. We're opening a campus out in Long Island this weekend in East Hampton. You can see the Hamptons there. I was in Montauk a couple of weeks ago. So there you go.
It's interesting. My wife's from Rhode Island, and I noticed in passing that where Newport is now, it's listed as Rhode Island. It's kind of, the name goes way back.
Yeah, and there's Fisher's Island. Interesting.
Just to the left of Manhattan, there's a town called Pavoni. One of my ancestors, Adrian Powell, was a founder or in the startup of the West Indies Dutch company, and he managed to start the first settlement to the west of the Hudson River, and that was done at Pavonia, which is a Latin version of the Dutch name Pauw. Pauw actually means peacock in Dutch.
Okay, great.
I think that's also from the 1620s. He was required to attract at least 50 families there by the rules of the West India Company, and didn't manage to do that. So about 10 years later, in the 30s or 40s, he sold it back to the company, and of course, the whole area changed anyway.
To me, what's interesting is when I decided I was going to do this map yesterday, I think, with and you start looking and thinking about it. Every time I look at a map and start thinking about it, this opens up new pathways of research and history that I kind of want to go back and read about. So I appreciate that, and I have a book I haven't read yet about the whole, about the Dutch Indies companies, the various East and West Indies companies. I want to read that. So,
yeah, I think they're the ones that originally paid $24 for Manhattan.
Yeah,
there's that sort of famous apocryphal story that occurs in, I think.
Yeah, Peter Minuet bought it from the Indian.
And I think it illustrates the difference between the way the Dutch did the business, which was to try and trade with the people, rather than the British, which was to conquer the people.
No, that's a very important point, because the Dutch were at heart traders and commercial people, right? And the British were, they were colonizing and trying to essentially expand their empire.
Imperialists.
Yeah.
Another ancestor.
You know, another thing, I can't remember which way it went, but this professor from Wesleyan, interesting guy, he's a scholar on Adrian Block, and his wife is a marine biologist. And he's gone back to study the impact of all of the beaver. They kind of decimated the beaver population for a while. And the lack of beavers caused the damming of the river to be diminished, which meant that more water flowed in and the silt was different. So his wife is measuring the silt and the sound, and they can map that back to changes in temperature due to the changing population of beavers in the day. So it's just really kind of freaky to think about that. But this big river, the Vershire River, is the fresh river. That's the river they were studying. So, and that's funny.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you for joining us from the East Coast and also preparing a map on a short notice. And good questions, everyone. I see see the other comments in the chat. So let's see, time-wise, since we have a cutoff here at noon, we're going to finish up with Tom talking about, speaking of, which map might be interesting, how would we show it, etc. Tom's going to talk to us a little bit about exploring maps, and then I'll delay my map till the next time, but I'll talk a little bit about our concept of 5-minute maps. So over to you, Tom, for exploring maps, and looks like we can still give that 10 minutes that you had.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to say a few thank yous here. First of all, to the wisdom of this group, to all of you. This has just been a lot of fun having everybody collectively chiming in on these maps and topics. It really is fun, and it's just I'm so appreciative of this entire group. Bill and Nick and Steve, thank you so much for your maps. Nagi, thank you for organizing this and leading us. Thank you in absentia to Courtney, who was involved in a lot of the pulling of this together. And then one other thank you. There's a gentleman on the line here today named Colin Smith, who works with me at Webster Pacific and actually has also worked on the digital gallery as well. So thank you, Colin. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a depressing poem about a man who feels isolated, frustrated, impotent, incapable of decisive action. I'm going to mute folks here because I'm getting some feedback. Hold on just a second. I'm going to mute everyone. And then you'll have to unmute yourself. All right. Nagi, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead, but I muted everybody. This is a really depressing poem about a man who's afraid to disturb the universe. And yet the author, T.S. Eliot, is also responsible for one of my favorite quotes, which is optimistic and filled with possibility. And I can't wait to ask the group how this can be. I'm going to offer one thought here, which is that maybe the Prufrock poem is a cautionary tale intended to take us to a dark place, to one where life is dark, kind of like the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and after we've read it, to resolve that we will not lead our lives like that. So that's the explanation I'm going to believe, because I love the quote on the following page, which is here. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So I believe, and I think there is evidence to back this up, that we are all built to learn. Alison Gopnik and a couple others wrote this wonderful book called The Scientist in the Crib, and the gist is that babies are little scientists, and that we are all hardwired to learn from the moment we are born. We're I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. If I need to close, I'm going to close my window here because there's some jackhammering going on in the background. I'm so sorry. Of course, it had to happen during the middle of my presentation. But now I'm back. And I'm terribly sorry about that. So look, I believe we're wired to learn. And from the beginning, the infant's brain is able to translate information from the world into representations that experience and then enable us to modify into more complex and abstract representations. And so we're all wired to learn. And I say, go at your own pace, but go. And whether it's Voltaire from the 1700s or modern day self-help gurus, the advice is to go, to cultivate your garden, to travel your journey, and to make it yours. And this is what I love about maps, because we can explore, we can collect, we can share, but we go at our own pace. And whatever steps we take, whatever explorations we have, they are all part of our journey, and they are valid. They are real. And unlike understanding wine, which I think is really hard and takes seemingly years to get good at, appreciating and understanding maps is something where you can see progress right away in your understanding. And so digital maps are now making our learning and engagement even easier. Each of these libraries have thousands of high-res images, digital images, available for our enjoyment and collection. So yes, you can collect digital images. I've put together a Google Sheet, and I welcome people's contributions and additions to this list. So I'm going to go here real quickly. And so this is a list of places where you can find maps, digital maps, and you can download those maps. And so as I was thinking about this event, I searched for Los Angeles in several of these libraries, and I ended up with a map from Los Angeles, from the Library of Congress, and it tells me a lot of things, but it also raises a lot of questions. And that, the learning and the questions, is why I find maps so fun. So I'm going to just jump into this and sort of show you how I did this and see if it works. So I'm going to search Los Angeles. And Nagi, if you're there, maybe you could unmute yourself and just make sure I'm doing okay and you've been able to hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. And Tom, do you want to put that link to that Google Drive that has the list in chat maybe later?
Yes, I will do that.
Or we can send it out after the fact.
And frankly, Steve or Colin, maybe you could do that. Just go into the curated text window and pull that link and then put it into the chat. So this was the search that I did of Los Angeles. And then I found, this map was interesting to me. I was like, how can this be Los Angeles? It isn't what Los Angeles looks like. And so I clicked on it. I'm in the Library of Congress. And this is the map. It doesn't look that inviting right now. But what I did was I clicked here and I clicked this JPEG 25.7 megabytes and I downloaded it. And then I uploaded it to the gallery. And you're going to see it here in just a second. And so here it is. And what I love, so this is from 1908. It's about the Los Angeles Aqueduct. I love the shape of early Los Angeles. I'm really curious about why Los Angeles started away from the water, because so many cities are related to water, and it has this funky shape. And then, of course, this draws out this a path of the aqueduct, which is huge in Los Angeles history. And so then I did, I made a few dots on the map where there's Owens Lake, the Tinnemaha Reservoir, the Long Valley Reservoir, which is now Lake Crowley, and even Mono Lake, which doesn't appear to be connected to the aqueduct, but I think it must have been connected later on. And so I'm going to wrap up here quickly. I think the only other thing I wanted to just touch on was just this whole concept of digital collecting. What to collect. So a number of people have given me this advice, collect what you're interested in. No sense in not doing that. how to collect, and maybe I can do this at another time, but talk about how you can collect things, how you can digitize things. I did that with Rich Bryman at his house, but there are other ways to digitize. Organizing is a digital endeavor, like organizing your files, and then viewing maps. There's a lot of ways to view digital maps. And I'll just show you one. So this is a map that Steve got last night from Barry Lawrence Ruderman, and so if you're a Windows person, there's a viewer, and you can view your maps on your computer. And of course, there are other ways to view them, and the gallery is certainly another way to view them. And then sharing them at places like this. So I think that's probably enough. I'm going to stop and see if there are questions. I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this map of Los Angeles also, and why it got the shape that. I'm going to put this question back to this wise group. Why did Los Angeles start not near the water?
And reminder to folks that you'll need to unmute.
Yes, I'm going to unmute.
Or Tom, if you want to unmute everyone, since we're kind of at the conversation phase.
Yep. There we go. Everybody's unmuted now, or should be.
Bill, you're muted.
Let me unmute. Bill Warren is unmuted.
After you've been unmuted by the host.
There we go.
Bill, try again. Let's see if we can hear you. You look like you're still muted.
Oh, I'm off. All right. I'm going to switch there.
I think Bill was trying to say something, but there you go. Bill's unmuted now.
Okay, what I was trying to say was your map is a little later than the first. Los Angeles was settled originally as 4 square leagues, and the earliest maps are an actual square showing that configuration. And the map, if you look at a map of Los Angeles today, you can see where the east and western boundaries are, because they are the ends of those 4 square leagues. One at Vermont, the other one is over in East Los Angeles. His name escapes me at the moment. Anyway, it's fun to look and see how it changed. Los Angeles changed a lot every time they decided to annex some more property, okay?
Also, I would comment that even though it wasn't at the ocean, those of you that are not from LA, I lived there 39 years, we all know that the trickle, that's now a little bit more than a trickle, was a pretty good, doggone good river, and supplied water for that. What was it called, Sanjay? Something Madre, right? The mother ditch.
Pablo, yeah.
Yep.
And the early settlers were farmers and cattlemen. They weren't mariners.
Interesting.
Well, one of the peculiar things about Los Angeles is if you go up to the upper Owens Valley, like around Bishop and Laws, several hundred miles from Los Angeles proper, you'll run into DWP trucks all over the place. So the tentacle that is the Los Angeles aqueduct is really quite something when you think about how far it goes to keep us in water down here.
I was going to say, how many?
We basically drained the Owens Lake.
Yes.
By the way, it's anybody pronounce it Z-A-N-J-A, Zandra Madre, which means mother ditch, but I don't know how to pronounce the Z-A-N-G-A.
Okay,
Hello.
thank you, Tom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just jump in here for the last 5 minutes because I know folks have constraints at noon, is to say thank you, and thank you to Mercedes for joining us from Mexico City, and other folks who have joined us from afar. And next time I'll do a better job of trying to ask at the beginning who's joining us from how far away. I want to end with going back to what Tom was saying about the different ways to be involved in with maps, and also the fact that so much of these gatherings are about the conversation. So what we're going to do for the next Glam, which will be our holiday Glam, so sometime in November or December, is where we are working on trying to reproduce a little bit more of the atmosphere of when we were gathering in person. So one thing that you might have seen on the agenda that we didn't have time to do was this idea named by Courtney of 5-minute maps. And so next time we'll gather for more of a happy hour and an informal map sharing.
Hey, Nagin?
You don't have to be a collector to be a part of this group. Yes, go ahead.
Nagin? No, well, I just want to interject. So I had a constraint that went away from me, so I will be able to stick around afterwards.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean, if you're game, I'll bet you a lot of people would stick around for 5 extra minutes to hear you do your 5-minute map.
Oh, to do my, okay, well, let's see. Let me finish saying what 5-minute maps are, and then I guess I will demonstrate. So the idea, again, for December and November, whenever we do this, is to go to something a little bit more informal, and that, you know, maybe alternate these with more of a happy hour, kind of a holiday thing, but also shift over to where people don't necessarily need to prepare extensively beforehand, or even load, you know, you can be spontaneous. What I recall from the Glams in person was that literally we would say, show up to this person's house, we'll have a few snacks, and we didn't know until we got there what maps we might see. And some people spent 5 minutes on their map, and some people spent 10 or 15. We just kind of see how many maps we had when we arrived. And there was time, which can be harder when you're virtual, for more conversation. Just like Tom said, here's this map. Now let's just talk about it. So along those lines, we'll be, again, either alternating with some more informal Glams, or leaving time at the end of each one for kind of an open mic for someone to say, here's a map that interested me. Okay, now let me turn off my virtual background so that you guys can then see me demonstrate this. So here's my 5-minute map, and I'm just going to put this in chat so everyone, so if you decide during the meeting that you want to see a cool map, or there's a map you want to talk about, this is the equivalent to, as you leave your house, you grab a map from the wall that you decide you want to show that day. So I put the link. Okay, so first I'm going to show you. Okay, so if you guys can see me, this is a page. Can you guys see it?
We can't see your screen if you're trying to share.
I know, it's not on my screen. I'm just showing it. Here, let me get rid of this. Here, there. I'm just holding it up to my camera. Okay.
Yep. Got it.
So, oh wait, I may be small. Oh, I see what's happening because it's my phone that you guys are hearing, right?
Right.
Can you see me on the little speaker thing?
The little one, yeah.
Yeah, I'll show you the screen in a minute. What I wanted to say is I was looking at Science Magazine. I was reading it, and I saw this very cool, I saw, you know, I didn't even read the title of the article so much as I was like, wow, that's a cool map. And it's, now I will share my screen. Okay. Share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so here's an example of informally, I'm not, you know, you don't have to collect maps to be a part of CMS. You can just, we encourage people to talk about maps that they think are cool or funny. I'm a big fan of terrible maps on Twitter, which are really funny maps. So this was a map that I saw again in Science Magazine, and what caught my attention was it was a map of like the deepest places in, you know, let me see if I can click on this and make it bigger. What happened? It was a map of some of the deepest places in the ocean. And given that my job, you know, what I do at my day job is to explore space and Mars, this kind of thing catches my attention. So when I saw it and went, hey, what is that super cool map of the different deepest places on this planet? I ended up learning a bit about something called the 5 Deeps Expedition. And this is the only thing I'm going to show you, and I'll just tell you a little bit about why I found this interesting. So there's this millionaire who, what is his name? Velasco Vasquez, I think is his name. And he is somebody who has skied to both poles. He has summited the 7 tallest mountains on the planet.
Wow.
And after doing that, he decided, well, I've been to the tallest spots. I've skied to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Why don't I try to go to the deepest spots in the ocean? So he along with, he has a submersible that is called here. Sorry, I was having my other notes. Oh, it's called the DSV Limiting Factor. And it's one of only 2 commercially rated Triton submarines that can go to these deepest points in the ocean. One of the other ones that was built was by James Cameron when he was doing Titanic, and he's also been to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. So when he said he was going to go to these places, right, like the Mole Deep, the Puerto Rican Trench, South Sandwich Trench, Java Trench, the Challenger Deep, there were obviously other parties that were interested in this. And one of those was Jebco, I think. So then I wandered off and started finding these other websites. So Jebco is they chart the oceans, and they're responsible for gathering, they're an organization that gathers all the bathymetric data, which is depth data of the oceans. And they are making an effort to make something called Seabed 2030. And this always, catches my attention, is that we know more about Mars than we do about, we've mapped more of Mars than we have of our own ocean. So Seabed 2030 is an attempt to get our oceans mapped as well as we know some other planets. So what happened is that organization said, hey, if you are actually paying the money to make these deep dives, these 5 expeditions to some of the deepest parts of the ocean in this sub from supported by a mothership, a seagoing ship, then take more sensors with you and get more data. So they actually provided people to participate in these expeditions to get more of this, so that they could carry more sensors, not just turn on their equipment when they got to the bottom of the Java Deep, but also to gather data as they went from one location in the southern ocean to the other. They didn't do all of these at the same time, and also as they come and go. And so they made it to all 5 of these spots. The website is I put it on chat. So I saw this in a magazine. I saw the map in Science Magazine. It was called Race to the Bottom, was the name of the little graphic that I showed you on the screen. That motivated me to read more about this thing called the 5 Deeps, and to learn more about Jebco and ocean mapping. So I just wanted to share that in the spirit of 5-minute maps. I'm not an expert on this. I'm not going to be able to answer a bunch of questions on this. I just thought it was a cool map.
That's really cool.
Really very nice. I wanted to make a comment about what you said. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm on my iPhone. That's why I'm not sure when I'm on and when I'm off. When we were running band meetings in people's houses, we never asked anybody to announce in advance what kind of a map they were bringing. The most we did was if a host was planning to discuss a particular thing, I might have mentioned that. For instance, one time I presented globes, so I just want to let people know it was going to be a globe presentation. I might have mentioned that Nick, in his last host, was going to talk about, I forget what you call those maps. Pictorial maps. But as far as everybody else, it was a surprise to everyone. And I think that's the best way to go because there's no tension, no studying in advance from other people. If the person that's going to present his map wants to study on it because he doesn't know too much, that's fine. It's just low key, and and a lot of it is the social events. So I think your idea, Negin, is a good one for the future.
Thank you, Len. That is kind of the goal, but again, virtual gives us the ability to kind of do a hybrid. So you know, Bill being so interested in this topic and spending a lot of time preparing is fine.
Right.
We're also trying, but we can literally, especially if people aren't married to the idea, like because I brought this map, because I prepared, I would like to go today. Right? If we had run out of time, in fact, I was chatting with Tom that said, hey, I could do this next time, right? That the informality that we have.
I had to do the same thing on our last virtual meeting because some people had great ideas, but the agenda was already fixed. And, I had spent a lot of time searching out people. So everybody who is presenting something should, if they feel that there's a lot to say about it, they ought to write it down for themselves because there's never any guarantee that you're going to be able to do it. Because the main thing is for people to limit themselves to the time allotted, and also to do a little practicing at home if you're not sure how much you can fit in the 10, 15 minutes.
Right, and thank you, Len. And a key point of that is the interaction, the chance to say, wow, I know a lot more about ocean maps than you do, Nagi, or whatever, because I happen, you know. So it was the social aspect, it was the informal.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that for the holiday glam, there is not going to be an agenda. It is going to be open mic, and it can be whoever has something they want to share, a funny map. If you have something you want to share for 20 minutes, that's fine, but we aren't going to set it up ahead of time to try to make sure that now and then we have a glam that allows us to talk more and do a little bit more what we would have done in person. So we can, you know, we can figure this out. We can alternate, but a lot, and glam is a little different than BAM in that we don't all know each other as well. We're spread out geographically. So we want to encourage participation of all different kinds. We have some super expert collectors, and we have folks, you know, like myself that aren't really collectors other than, you know, souvenir tourist maps that you get at the hotel front desk, right? And so you don't have to be a collector. If you see a funny map that you just want to share, and you also don't have to become an expert in the map you're sharing. What I just told you about 5 Deeps is about all the time I had, is all I know about it. So there's room for everyone in these gatherings, and so I'll leave it.
If it's going to be, yeah, you're right.
So that everyone gets.
If it's going to be a free form, if it's going to be a free form gathering, every once in a while somebody will be happy to talk to the entire session.
Yeah.
And I think that is really an imposition on everybody else. It's just the time to tune in. And you'd still have to control and say, you know, you have X number of minutes for your map because other people may want to talk.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Len, that open mic doesn't mean whoever gets the mic first gets to keep it for the whole time. So
it'll happen.
You don't have to prepare.
It's a natural inclination.
David, you might be muted.
David,
David. Go ahead, David.
I recommend that perhaps Len and Najee carry this conversation on the side as the administrators of the 2 plans. I think you all have good ideas, but I think
so we are about to close out. We just wanted to say,
well,
so who's
you know,
here from the furthest? We have Mercedes is from Mexico City, and Steve is from the East Coast. Do we have others joining us from other locales?
I'm close. I'm 200 miles away in Nevada.
In Nevada. I know sometimes
Yeah.
we've had past presidents with us, and
Yeah,
Enough.
you're right. I do think that our discussing our ideas in public is a good idea because it's transparency. I mean, and people, I think the more transparent we are, the more people want to stay involved. So, any event,
well, we also
great
want
meeting.
to,
Great meeting, Nagin. You did a great job.
thank you. A reminder of
speaker-
Glam Gals every second Monday, and then we have the October conference. That's the fall conference. That obviously is more formal. Thanks to Courtney for all she's doing to set that up. Does anyone from BAM have a date for the next BAM they'd like to share or anything?
I don't think we have a date yet.
No.
Len, we've talked about that, but I don't think we have a date yet. I think the next thing we have coming up is the Southern California CMS meeting in
Right.
October.
Right, the fall conference that Courtney's working so hard on. Again, Courtney sends her greetings. Thank you, everybody, and we
Can I
will
ask one
see you at
question
the
and
next
make an
one.
announcement?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
Very quickly. Does anybody know if Michael Jennings at Neatline Maps is still making his offer of purchase of maps, all of the money going directly to COVID research? He made an offering to the club that anybody who wanted to buy a group of really wonderful maps, and I know there are a couple of members who participated. He guarantees that not only the cost of the map that you're paying, as well as the shipping is covered. He will forward all of it at no cost to the COVID funding. So if that offering is still in place, I'd like to encourage people to participate in it. Does anybody know if he's still making that offer?
I don't know.
Okay, well, be aware of it because it's a wonderful, generous offer from Michael Jennings. Thanks.
Okay. Nice.
I have an
Okay, thanks,
announcement.
everybody. Oh, go ahead,
I have
Lee.
an announcement. It's the in October, the Western Association of Map Libraries, WAML.org, is having their online conference October 14th through 16th. It's free. So just go to WAML.org and you can get the information there.
Thank you, Louise.
Again, congratulations. Wonderfully innovative meeting. Look forward to the next one.
Right.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Chris. You're muted.
I am. Okay, how's that?
Good, good.
Thank you for the invitation. Great fun.
Thank you for joining.
You're lighting a fire under me with respect to maps.
Well, the guy who lit it for me is still on the line here. That's Steve in New York.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just spreading the good word. You want to share a map soon, Chris?
Oh, that's too frightening.
Come on.
I'm just a little guy compared to these luminaries on maps.
Come on. No way. I know you.
I'll keep it in mind.
I would think you would have the map of the ocean there, right?
I would. I think I've even seen something like that before. I can't remember where, but that expedition's, gotten some publicity here and there.
Yeah.
There was an article on it in the New Yorker within.
Yes,
I read
exactly.
in the New Yorker about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's quite an undertaking he's taken. But this is great. Plus, it's exposing me to all these map organizations I had no idea existed out there. And all these map hobbyists and experts. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom,
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Tom, is there a list of the people that presented today? I wanted to follow up with some of these things.
Well, yeah, you can go to the digital gallery and it's all there. And in a day or two, I'm going to have all the talks up.
Oh, okay.
But if you, go to the gallery and I'll actually, hold on. I'll put it in the chat right now. The link to the exhibit on the gallery. Give me just a second.
Oh, okay.
and I'll put it right in the chat here. So this has all the images, and it'll have the recordings too. You see in the chat there?
I'm trying to get it up. Oh yeah, over on the right here.
Yep.
And Tom,
yeah,
can Mr. Jake or Chris introduce himself and your connection or where he's from? I don't.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Chris Jake. I live in San Francisco, about half a block from Tom. Coincidentally, we met about 20 years ago at a Stanford business school event, and our paths have crossed since then, now and then, and it's just coincidental that my wife and I moved to within, like I say, about half a block from Tom several years ago. So I see a little bit more of Tom Tom and Cody than I did before. So
What are your areas of interest?
Yeah.
What are your areas of interest?
Oh, well, there are far too many, really. But
Name three.
If I start thinking about maps, I think about Alaska. So I've been to Alaska quite a number of times, and to different parts of Alaska, and have just tourist maps to get around town. But I may develop that as a deeper interest because of meetings like this.
Chris is being a little bit shy. He founded in San Francisco an event called the Ocean Film Festival 20 years ago or so. And then he also introduced me to an organization called the Dolphin Club in San Francisco. And I think at one point, one time he convinced me to go swimming in the bay, and it was a horrible experience for me. And I only did it once. Of course, he does it to this day multiple times every week.
On New Year's Day?
I've done Alcatraz on New Year's Day several times. It's more fun than it sounds. Just take my word for it.
Thank God.
It's a great spot. And I hope Tom is still a member down there.
I'm continue to pay my membership and think about going. I became a rower at the Dolphin Club.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that.
Gentlemen, I'm going to sign off.
Yep, me too.
I
nice to meet
fortunately
you.
or unfortunately made it out of Carmel Valley before a mandatory evacuation, and I'm safe in San Jose right now. So,
James, have you been active in the Bay Area or Bay Area map group? Because
were you asking me?
Yeah.
Yes, for as long as BAM's been around, and before that, of course, CMS.
Yeah.
I mean, not that they're not connected, but yeah.
Great.
Talking about the fires, there's a very good site called Purple Air, and it'll show you what the smoke level is at thousands of spots around the world, but particularly in the Bay Area, it's very active right now. And I can monitor the level of smoke in San Mateo, where I live, or in South San Jose, where my son lives, or in the East Bay, where our daughter lives. And it's a real-time monitoring thing, and it's called Purple Air, and it's another map.
And I was breathing it for 5 days, and apparently not any the worse for it. I'm more interested in the fire because my house is within 5 miles or 4 miles or 3 miles or whatever it is now.
Wow.
So
good luck.
Yeah. All right. Well, keep up on that. All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. For me, you guys can stick around. I'm checking out.
Yeah.
All right.
If I can figure out how to get out here.
Do it here in just a second.
Oh, leave me.